Good morning. My name is Gregory Longini, Secretary to the Chicago Transit Board. First, I would like to note that in accordance with Executive Orders 2020-07 and 2020-10 issued by Governor Pritzker and via teleconference through Webex. This meeting is being streamed live on CTA's website, and public speakers have been invited to join the teleconference and have been provided with a telephone number to our board secretary. One speaker has requested to speak and will be called upon during the public comment section of the board meeting. Also, one person submitted written comments, and those comments will be read during the public comment section of the board meeting. Our first order of business today is the meeting of the Finance, Audit, and Budget Committee, noticed for 9:30 a.m. this morning. Alejandro Silva, the committee's chairman, will conduct the meeting. Chairman Silva, you may begin the meeting and proceed to agenda item number 1.
So we're going to start right now, eh?
That's correct, Chairman Silva. You can begin the meeting.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I would like to call to order the April 8, 2020 meeting of the Committee on Finance, Audit, and Budget. Will the Secretary call the roll?
Yes. Director Chevrolet.
Here.
Director Jakes.
Present.
Director Miller.
Here.
Director Irvine.
I'm here.
Director Silva.
I'm here.
Director Alvarez.
Present.
Director Peterson.
Present.
We have a quorum with all 6 members of the committee present. Chairman Silva, please proceed to agenda item number 2.
Our first order of business is the approval of the committee minutes of March 12, 2020. May I have a motion to approve?
Chairman, it's actually going to be March 11th. But we will ask for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
The motion has been moved by Director Alvarez, been seconded by Director Irvine. I will now take a roll call vote. Director Chevrolet.
Yes.
Director Jakes.
Yes.
Director Miller.
Yes.
Director Irvine.
Yes.
Director Silva.
Yes.
Director Alvarez.
Yes.
Director Peterson.
Yes.
Director Irvine, did you say yes or abstain?
I said yes, but I meant to say abstain.
Okay, so then you're going to abstain from the vote in the motion on the minutes.
Yes.
Correct. The motion passes with 6 yes votes and 1 abstention by Director Irvine. Chairman Silva, you may proceed to agenda item number 3.
Our next order of business is the finance report. Jeremy Fine.
Good morning. I'm Jeremy Fine, your Chief Financial Officer, and I'll walk through the results for February. I wanted to give you a brief rundown of these results, which were primarily derived prior to the impact of COVID-19. With regard to February revenue, we see Farebox was down to budget and to last year due to the monthly budget spreads that we spread across the year and what we presume may have been early adoption of social distancing since we see that we were down to last year, even though we had an extra day in February of 2020. Passes were slightly down due again to the budget spread. We see reduced fare subsidy at budget. We see non-Farebox totals down about $200,000 due to the effect of non-capital grant revenues and the new state parking tax. Total revenues ended up the month down approximately $1.3 million, and we see free rides up slightly due to the better weather and the extra day, again, due to the leap year. With regard to year-to-date revenues, the vectors are relatively the same across the categories, and year-to-date total revenues are down approximately $700,000 to budget, but up almost $4 million to last year. February expenses, we see labor down slightly to budget by about $260,000. Materials were down about $460,000. Fuel was positive to budget about $225,000. Power, injuries and damages, and security services were essentially flat. And then other expenses were positive due to the timing of non-capital grant revenue and other contractual expenses. So we ended up February positive on our expenses to the tune of about $650,000. Net against the revenues, we were down for the month approximately $650,000. On a year-to-date expense basis, we see the vectors, again, relatively the same across the categories, with total expenses down approximately $1 million. Net against the revenues, we're down to budget about $1.7 million. But again, looking historically, that is not bad for the first 2 months of the year. Again, a different story with regard to the effect of COVID, which we'll talk about in a moment. The public funding for 2019, we ended up the year positive by about $5 million. Public funding for 2020 is down with regard to PTF and the real estate transfer tax, and those are the only two receipts that we received to date for 2020. With regard to commodities, we have locked in for what we need in the short term, but in a few moments we'll highlight a fuel opportunity with regard to future purchases. This concludes my February FAB report. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jeremy. This is Longini. I will now ask the board members if you have any questions for Mr. Fine regarding the finance report. Judge Chevrolet.
No, I do not have any questions.
Reverend Jakes.
No questions.
Reverend Miller.
No.
Director Irvine.
No questions.
Chairman Silva.
No questions.
Director Alvarez-Rosales.
No questions.
Director Peterson.
Yeah, this is Terry. I've got one question. I want to sort of, Jeremy, you know, in light of the fact that, and I know this is before COVID-19, and I see we're still down for February in terms of labor. The page I'm looking at is year-to-date expenses. So I see we're down a little bit over $2 million in labor. We're down a little bit under $500,000, about $400,000 in terms of materials. I'm just curious, and I don't know if you can answer this or not, but trying to see what would be some of the savings. I know, you know, ridership is down and all of that, but are there savings that we're also realizing during this period of time as well?
Well, with regard to labor during the COVID outbreak, we continue to keep all CTA employees employed. So there's the labor line will remain relatively static. There's some additional costs with regard to materials and cleaning supplies that we're incurring. You know, the fuel and the power, again, because we're running service as we normally would, those are relatively the same. So, you know, there's not a lot of cost savings, again, trying to maintain, you know, the service that we're putting out there on the street for the folks that continue to ride the system for their essential needs.
Okay.
Does that conclude your questions, Chairman Peterson?
Yes.
Thank you. Chairman Silva, we may now proceed to agenda item number 4.
Our next order of business is the review of an ordinance authorizing the establishment of a short-term operating borrowing program. Jeremy.
Thank you. This is Jeremy Fine, your Chief Financial Officer. To provide a little context regarding the ordinance before you today that authorizes working cash notes, due to the COVID-19 outbreak, we've seen reductions in ridership and obviously fare revenue. That's a reciprocal effect of that. We see public funding impacts, but those won't be coming online for a couple of months because the real estate transfer tax, the sales tax, and the PTF are all received in arrears. To address these impacts, the federal government passed landmark legislation on March 27th, granting historic levels of flexible funding. Unlike traditional federal funds, these allocations are flexible and can be used to cover COVID costs as well as continued operating costs. Details of when and how the funds will flow are still being worked out, but we expect to begin receiving funds shortly. Based on early indications, the CTA could receive approximately $800 million. While we fully expect to receive federal funds shortly, as a temporary bridge, CTA staff is recommending approval to establish a short-term borrowing program. The MTA Act allows for up to $40 million of purposes of providing short-term operating borrowing. The CTA will enter into an agreement with the banking provider, as we have done with the capital lines, and funds will only be drawn if needed. CTA revenues, including federal funds, would be used to repay any or all draws. And the federal funding, again, was a real game changer for us, but it is critical for us to continue to receive all owed state and local funding. This concludes my report with regard to working cash notes. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jeremy. I will now ask the board members if you have any questions on this agenda item number 4. Director Chevrolet?
No questions.
Director Jakes?
No questions.
Director Miller?
No question.
Director Irvine?
No questions.
Chairman Silva?
Yes, when are you expecting, the money from the Fed to come in?
We're still working with the local office and with the RTA. It will take a matter of a few weeks to work through the details of that. We don't have a definitive timeline yet. Obviously, once we get a better handle from the regional office of what that timing would look like, along with our folks at the RTA, we'll be circling back with the board and giving you more details on when those funds will be flowing.
But you do have enough to run the system, right?
The flow of funds will be similar to what we receive in other federal grants. So yes, we do have the system, so to speak, the structure of how to receive the funding. Obviously, these funds are more flexible than the funds that we traditionally receive from the federal government. And then CTA personnel, at finance and elsewhere are still able to function and receive these funds and apply them for the needs that we have.
Director Silva, this is Dorval Carter. I think in direct response to your question, yes, we have enough money right now to continue operating the system. Part of what Jeremy is presenting to you for the board's consideration today is giving us the flexibility to deal with any additional costs that we may incur before we receive those funds. We're also in conversation with RTA about the RTA possibly issuing debt that could also serve to support and supplement the service boards while we wait for the federal funding. So there are numerous options being put in place to ensure the system can continue to operate while we're awaiting receipt of the federal funds themselves.
Thank you.
Director Alvarez-Rosales, any questions?
No questions. Thank you.
Director Peterson?
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. One, so Jeremy, just to kind of follow up on what Dorval was just saying, based upon our daily spend and cash on hand right now, how long would we be able to continue to operate before we would have to draw down on this $40 million line of credit?
So we have enough cash to clearly get us through the month of April. There's some additional things, additional measures, including the working cash notes that get us a little bit additional time. But again, it's critical for us to continue to work with the RTA to ensure that those federal funds flow quickly. And as President Carter indicated, the RTA also has the ability to issue working cash notes, which they're working on as well, for the benefit of the 3 service boards. So, again, we can make it through the month of April, and then with some additional measures, we can extend that out further, which would allow us to, receive the federal funding with no kind of gap in between.
Yeah, the reason I asked the question, what's the interest rate on the $40 million line of credit? I know it doesn't hit us until we draw down, but what was the interest rates on this line of credit?
So we're estimating, again, it'll be dependent upon market conditions at the time, but, in the 1.5% range. So again, it's a fairly low rate that we would expect on this type of product. It'll be market dependent, but, again, market rates right now are relatively low. And so that's assuming, again, that we draw down the $40 million, which again, this is more of an insurance policy, so to speak, that we would have in place if the federal funding is delayed, if the COVID outbreak lasts longer than expected, or if there's a reoccurrence in the future. Again, this just kind of helps us bridge until those federal funds are received.
Right. So how many days would the $40 million line of credit provide in terms of just operating costs for us?
So our
month of operating? Yeah.
So our typical operating expense, cost on average is about $4.3 million a day. So this would provide, about a week and a half or so. But again, we feel like the federal funding is coming quickly. And so this is, again, just kind of helping us bridge those short-term gaps between, when we would actually receive those federal funds.
Got it. Okay.
And this, again, would be used in concert, if needed at all, would be used in concert with what the RTA is doing on their side with regard to working cash notes.
Yeah, the only reason, although the interest rates are low, 1.5%, I know we're going to use every kind of, tool at our disposal before we draw down, but 1.5% is still 1.5%. And I would love to be able to get that $800 million through the door without having to pay back a loan with low interest rates. So again, I know you guys are focused on the durable. That's why I was just asking the question about interest rates and making sure that we use every other tool possible before we have to draw down something that would cause us, that has an interest rate attached to it, because the interest rate, whatever the dollar amount is not something we're going to get reimbursed for.
Absolutely.
All right, thanks.
All right, that finishes all the questions on this item. Chairman Silver, we're finished with questions.
Since there are no further questions, may I have leave to place this item on the omnibus for board approval?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Director Alvarez-Rosales, seconded by Director Irvine. Chairman Silver, we may now proceed to agenda item number 5.
Our next order of business is the review of an ordinance authorizing the execution of supplemental indentures and issuance of capital receipt revenue refunding bonds, the Series 2020 Garvey bonds. Jeremy?
Thank you. I'm Jeremy Fine, your CFO. Independent from the working cash notes, the CTA is also seeking approval of 4 bond transactions, and I'll walk through each of those individually. But collectively, these transactions were scheduled to come before the board prior to the COVID outbreak. The 2 new money transactions provide funding for projects and refund a portion of the outstanding capital line of credit. And the 2 refunding transactions provide economic savings without extending maturities of outstanding bonds. The first transaction for which the CTA is seeking approval is to execute a refunding of outstanding capital grant receipt revenue bonds known as Garveys. These are federal funds that we receive for interest rate savings. The Series 2020 Garvey refunding bonds ordinance authorizes a principal amount not to exceed $175 million. These bonds will refund all or a portion of the outstanding 2010 and Series 2011 bonds. The security pledge is the CTA's Federal Section 5307, a grant program for urbanized areas, and a 5337 formula program, which is for stated good repair projects. The Garvey bond team is led by Senior Manager of Bank of America. The bond counsel is Catton Muchin. Disclosure counsel is Charity and Associates. The financial advisor is Acacia Financial Group, and the trustee is Amalgamated Bank. Women and minority and disabled veteran firms represented on the underwriting team is 38%. This concludes my report, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jeremy. Director Chevrolet, any questions?
No questions.
Director Jakes?
No questions.
Director Miller?
No question.
Director Irvine?
No questions.
Chairman Silva?
No questions.
Director Alvarez-Rosales?
No questions.
Director Peterson?
Jeremy, you might have mentioned this. I know we're refinancing this for savings. What did you state what the savings would be over that period of time with refinancing it?
So based on current market conditions, we estimate that the potential savings could be in the neighborhood of about $20 million.
Over what period of time?
Over the life of the bonds.
And that is what? How many years?
Through 2029. So we're effectively refunding higher interest rate debt with what would effectively be about 2% interest rate debt, which would generate about $20 million over the rest of the life of the bonds.
Okay, thanks.
Since there are no further questions, Chairman Silva.
Since there are no further questions, may I have leave to place this item on the omnibus for board approval?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Director Alvarez-Rosales and seconded by Director Irvine. Chairman Silva, we may now proceed to agenda item number 6.
Our next order of business is the review of an ordinance authorizing the execution of supplemental indentures and issuance of sales tax receipts, revenue refunding bonds, Series 2020, and sales tax receipts and transfer tax receipts, revenue refunding bonds, the Series 2020 refunding bonds. Jeremy Fine.
Thank you. Again, this is Jeremy Fine. CTA is seeking approval to execute a refunding of outstanding sales tax bonds for interest rate savings. The Series 2020 sales tax revenue refunding bond ordinance authorizes a refunding of up to $1.2 billion. Based on market conditions, we estimate that the savings could be approximately $18 million in 2020. The security pledge is a sales tax revenue pledge, and the refunding bond team is led by Goldman Sachs. Bond counsel is Mayor Brown. Co-bond counsel is Sanchez and Daniels. Disclosure counsel is Thompson Coburn. The financial advisors are Sycamore Advisors and Public Alternative. The trustee is Zion's Bank, and the women, minority, disabled, veteran-owned firm representation for the underwriting team is approximately 35%. This concludes my report, and I'm glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jeremy. Judge Chevrolet, any questions?
No questions.
Reverend Jakes?
No questions.
Reverend Miller?
Just wanted to ask, was that our estimated goal, just 35% for the DBEs?
Yes, as we talked about in some of the other transactions, the WMBE percentage is even higher. But again, we've done a great job here at CTA of WMBE participation in the transactions. The city typically has around 30% for its transactions, and so again, we're meeting and exceeding what you see from other local jurisdictions in regard to WMBE percentages on our transactions.
Thank you.
Director Irvine?
No question.
Chairman Silva?
No questions.
Director Alvarez-Rosales?
No questions. Just a comment that I'm glad to see that we're maintaining our numbers high, and the more we can go on the MBE, WB participation. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Director Peterson?
No questions.
Chairman Silver, there are no further questions on this matter.
Since there are no further questions, may I have leave to place this item on the omnibus for board approval?
So moved.
Second.
That motion was moved by Director Alvarez-Rosales and seconded by Director Irvine. Chairman Silver, we may proceed now to agenda item number 7.
Our next order of business today is the review of an ordinance authorizing the execution of supplemental indentures and issuance of sales tax receipts, revenue bonds, Series 2020, the Series 2020 new money bonds. Jeremy?
Thank you. Again, this is Jeremy Fine. The CTA is seeking approval for to execute a sales tax new money transaction to fund projects included in the 2020 through 2024 capital improvement program. The sales tax revenue bond, Series 2020 new money bonds ordinance authorizes a principal amount not to exceed $450 million. The pledge is sales tax revenues. The proceeds from the sale will reimburse a portion of the line of credit as well as fund projects in the 2020 through 2024 CIP, including the Red Purple modernization, the Red Line extension, bus purchases, rail car purchases and overhaul, and your new blue O'Hare signals. The sales tax new money team is led by Senior Manager Siebert William Schenk. The bond counsel is Mayor Brown. Co-bond counsel is McGaw Law Group. Disclosure counsel is Thompson Coburn. Financial advisors are Columbia Capital Management. The trustee is Zion's Bank Corp. And the women and minority disabled veteran-owned firm representation is 60%. This concludes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jeremy. Any questions, Judge Chevrolet?
No questions.
Reverend Jakes?
No questions.
Reverend Miller?
No question.
Director Irvine?
No questions.
Chairman Silva?
No questions.
Director Alvarez-Rosales?
No questions.
Director Peterson?
Yeah, Jeremy, I've got a question. So I know the board is we're approving a number of bond deals today, and I'm just thinking, with the market being up and down, are you going to stagger these as they go into the market?
Yes, that's a great question. So we are obviously watching the market diligently on a day-to-day basis. We have, the plan is to appropriately kind of gear up for each of these bond deals so that we price them appropriately. What I mean by that is that, we may try to couple some of the deals together just to get a pricing advantage, meaning that the sales tax refunding and sales tax new money, because it's essentially the same credit, those may go, at a similar type pace. But the other deals can be decoupled and a little bit, disassociated in time so that we don't flood the market with bonds all in one fell swoop. So again, we'll be watching the market and what investors are kind of, transmitting to us with regard to appetite for the particular credits, and we'll be pricing them based on that cadence.
And do you think prior to our May board meeting that you will have completed all of these transactions?
So we think that, we will probably be in the market, or we would like to be in the market with the sales tax bonds in mid-May, assuming that the market is a good time to price. That would allow us to close those bonds in late May. With the other transactions, again, somewhat similar timing, but lagging probably a little bit. So, we may have an update as to a better update for the May meeting with regard to the final timing for the 4 transactions.
Okay, that would be great at the May board meeting if you could provide the board with an update on the status of these bond offerings.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Chairman Silva, there are no further questions on this item.
Since there are no further questions, may I have leave to place this item on the omnibus for board approval?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Director Alvarez-Rosales, seconded by Director Irvine. Chairman Silva, we may proceed now to agenda item number 8.
Our next order of business is the review of an ordinance authorizing the execution of supplemental indentures and issuance of sales tax receipts, revenue bonds, Series 2020, Ground Transportation Tax IGA revenues. Jeremy.
Thank you. Again, this is Jeremy Fine. The CTA is seeking approval for a new money transaction to fund fast tracks and safe and secure projects. The funding source for the bonds is the ground transportation tax or ride-hailing fee revenues we receive from the city for these projects. But they will also carry a backup security pledge of the sales tax revenues. The sales tax revenue bond series 2020, also known as the GTT IGA revenue bonds, ordinance authorizes a principal amount not to exceed $200 million, and the pledge is again the IGA with the city for the GTT funding that we receive on an annual basis of $16 million. And then we have an additional pledge of sales tax, which is similar to the pledge that we have on the capital line of credit for these projects. The proceeds from the sale will reimburse a portion of the line of credit and fund projects in the 2020 through 2024 CIP, including fast tracks and safe and secure. The sales tax GTT bond team is led by Senior Manager Cabrera Capital Markets. bond counsel of Mayor Brown, the co-bond counsel of Shaw Legal Services, disclosure counsel of Thompson Coburn, financial advisors of Mahanti Garjula and Blue Rose Capital, trustee is Zion's Bank Corp, and the women, minority, disabled, veteran-owned firm representation on this transaction is 100%. This concludes my report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jeremy. Any questions, Director Chevrolet?
No questions.
Reverend Jakes?
No questions.
Reverend Miller?
No question.
Director Irvine?
No questions.
Chairman Silva?
No questions.
Director Alvarez-Rosales?
No questions.
Director Peterson?
No questions.
Chairman Silva, there are no further questions on this item.
Since there are no further questions, may I have leave to place this item on the omnibus for board approval?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Director Alvarez-Rosales, seconded by Director Irvine. We may now proceed to agenda item number 9, Chairman Silva.
Our next order of business is the review of an ordinance authorizing an amendment to a diesel fuel contract with Mansfield Oil Company of Gainesville, Inc. to extend the contract for 1 year. Jeremy Fine.
Thank you. Again, this is Jeremy Fine. CTA staff is requesting board approval on 2 diesel procurement-related ordinances, which we'll discuss independently. The first one is an ordinance authorizing a 1-year extension of the CTA's current diesel fuel contract with Mansfield Oil, and the second is an ordinance authorizing the CFO, with the approval of the board chairman, to execute a new diesel fuel contract. The first contract, though, is with regard to the contract with Mansfield, which ends December 31st, 2021. The first proposed ordinance would authorize an amendment to the current contract to add 1 additional year option through December 31, 2022. Diesel prices, both from current and future fuel supply, have sharply declined due to demand destruction from the COVID-19 pandemic and an ensuing price war between Saudi Arabia and Russia, which has flooded an already oversupplied market. By extending the current diesel supply contract through December 31st, 2022, the CTA will be able to lock in fuel pricing during this additional year, thereby taking advantage of historically low prices and reducing cost uncertainty. At the current estimated 2022 diesel supply price of $2.10 per gallon, the estimated year-over-year impact on CTA would be a savings of $2.8 million compared to the budgeted cost for diesel supply in 2021, which was $2.22 per gallon. On the same basis, the current estimated 2022 diesel supply cost would represent a savings of over $7.4 million compared to the budgeted cost for diesel supply in 2020, which was $2.55 a gallon. This concludes my report, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jeremy. Judge Chevrolet, any questions?
No questions.
Reverend Jakes?
No questions.
Reverend Miller?
No question.
Director Irvine?
No questions.
Chairman Silva?
The volume that we're going to be buying, okay, similar to this year?
Yes, we lock in approximately 85% of our expected needs. So again, we usually buy it in tranches. So we probably wouldn't go out and buy the full block all at one time, just because that is a lot for the market to absorb. But we'll again assess the market at the time. But we assume again that we would lock in a similar type of amount at a maximum as we move forward.
So that will give us enough for next year for 2 years?
This would be, we've already locked in for next year. This would just be for the 2022 volume amount.
2022.
Any further questions, Director Silva?
No.
No further questions. Director Peterson?
No questions.
All right, Chairman Silva, there are no further questions on this matter.
Since there are no further questions, may I have leave to place this item on the omnibus for board approval?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Director Alvarez-Rosales, seconded by Director Irvine. Chairman Silva, we may now proceed to agenda item number 10.
Our next order of business is the review of an ordinance authorizing the treasurer to execute a diesel fuel contract. Jeremy Fine.
Thank you. Again, this is Jeremy Fine. The second proposed ordinance would authorize the CFO with the approval of the board chairman to enter into a new contract for CTA's fuel supply. The new contract for purchasing fuel with a responsible third-party fuel provider would be for a base period of 3 years starting in January 2023 with 2 one-year extension options that can be exercised. Establishing a new fuel contract would allow the CTA to take advantage of future prices that are trading at unprecedented lows as producers compete for market share by increasing production and lowering prices, all while the global demand continues to suffer simultaneously. This concludes my report, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jeremy. Any questions? Judge Chevrolet.
No questions.
Reverend Jakes.
No questions.
Reverend Miller.
No questions.
Director Irvine.
No questions.
Chairman Silva.
No questions.
Director Alvarez-Rosales.
No questions.
Director Peterson.
Yeah, Jeremy, is there a DBE goal for this contract?
So I don't know if JP is on the line, but the contract has had involvement on DBEs with the actual supply, the trucking supply to our garage facilities, but I'll defer to JP with.
This is Longini.
Good morning. This is
JP is on the line.
Good morning. This is Juan Pablo Prieto, Director of Diversity Programs. This contract does have a 5% DBE goal, and like Jeremy said, the opportunity that we identified was trucking, hauling the fuel to our locations.
Okay.
Thank you. There are no further questions on this item, Chairman Silva.
Since there are no further questions, may I have leave to place this item on the omnibus for board approval?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Director Alvarez-Rosales, seconded by Director Irvine. Chairman Silva, we may now proceed to agenda item number 11.
Our next order of business is the review of an ordinance authorizing a co-promotional trade advertising trade agreement with Bank of America for the 2020 Bank of America Chicago 13.1. Jeremy Fine.
Thank you. Again, this is Jeremy Fine. The co-promotional trade agreement with Bank of America for the 2020 Chicago Half Marathon, which is scheduled to occur on June 7th of this year. Obviously, we continue to monitor the larger situation and whether or not this event will continue to happen. But as of now, it continues to be on the books. This is the first time the Half Marathon event is being held and sponsored by Bank of America. CTA has joined with B of A or its predecessor for 20 years to promote events like the Marathon and the Shamrock Shuffle. The trade value is not to exceed $17,523. Bank of America will provide the following, valued at that amount. The CTA, its logo, its transit information and rail map on the runner information page with a link to the CTA's website that allows folks, again, to go in and purchase fare in advance. We also have our logo and travel information in their newsletters as well as their sponsor profile page. The CTA will provide up to $17,523 of unsold advertising space in the form of car cards on the rail system and the bus. The Bank of America will also purchase advertising on the CTA system in an amount to equal that $17,523 figure. Several risk mitigation provisions are included to protect the CTA. Bank of America pays for the car card production, and Intersection pays for the installation. If the event were to not happen, it was prior to the installation of the car cards, in early May, they would not be installed. If they were installed, they would be taken down if, again, the event were to be canceled. So the bottom line here is that CTA bears no risk if the event is canceled. This concludes my report, and glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jeremy. Any questions, Judge Chevrolet?
No questions.
Reverend Jakes?
No questions.
Reverend Miller?
No questions.
Director Irvine?
No questions.
Chairman Silva?
The having the date, okay, already set, okay, for June the 7th, okay, it seems, okay, that they're very sure, okay, that by then, okay, it's going to be open, okay, all the city, okay, and everything.
Yeah, the sponsors of the event are very adamant that that they want to continue to see the event happen. Obviously that will be directed by the health professionals on whether or not that event actually does happen. But again, as of right now, the event has not been canceled. And B of A has been a very good partner with us on these other events. And again, the cost is being borne away from the CTA with regard to the production costs of the car cards.
So we're not taking any chances in this, right?
No, and in fact, again, they've been working, the sponsors have been working for a long time on this event. They have newsletters and other website information that includes includes our logo, includes, that public transit is a great way to get to and from the event. So again, our messaging, will continue to be out there as long as this event is scheduled to happen. So again, this is a long-term. It's a very good partnership for the event planners as well as the CTA to have these types of arrangements. But again, we'll all be tracking it very closely on whether or not the event needs to be canceled or rescheduled.
That's good news.
Thank you. Director Alvarez-Rosales?
No questions.
Director Peterson?
No questions.
Chairman Silva, there are no further questions on this item.
Since there are no further questions, may I have leave to place this item on the omnibus for board approval?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Director Alvarez-Rosales, seconded by Director Irvine. Chairman Silva, we may now proceed to agenda item number 12.
Our next order of business is the review of an ordinance authorizing an amendment to a sublease to Decennial Group LLC of a portion of property located at 120 North Racine Avenue, Chicago, Illinois. Bill Mooney.
Bill Mooney, your Chief Infrastructure Officer. Staff recommends approval of an ordinance authorizing an amendment to a sublease between Sterling Racine LLC and Decennial Group LLC for property located at 120 North Racine Avenue. On August 12, 2015, the Transit Board approved a 10-year lease with Sterling Racine LLC for 84,879 square feet on the first and second floors of the CTA-owned building at 120 North Racine. On August 14, 2019, the Board approved a sublease between Sterling Racine LLC and Decennial Group LLC. Sterling Racine has requested CTA's consent to amend the current sublease with Decennial Group LLC to extend it on a month-to-month basis. Sterling Racine will continue to be responsible for all rent and expenses as set forth in the lease agreement, including its proportionate share of the building operating expenses and all applicable taxes and utility fees. Sterling Racine is required to obtain CTA's consent prior to subleasing, which cannot be unreasonably withheld. I am happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Bill. Any questions, Judge Chevrolet?
No questions.
Reverend Jakes?
No questions.
Reverend Miller?
No questions.
Director Irvine?
No questions.
Chairman Silva?
No questions.
Director Alvarez-Rosales?
No questions.
Director Peterson?
No question.
Chairman Silva, there are no further questions on this item.
Since there are no further questions, may I have leave to place this item on the omnibus for board approval?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Director Alvarez-Rosales, seconded by Director Irvine. Chairman Silva, we may now proceed to agenda item number 13.
Our next order of business is the review of an ordinance authorizing a lease of retail concession space located at 4612 West 59th Street, Chicago, Illinois. Orange line. Bill Mooney.
Bill Mooney, your Chief Infrastructure Officer. Real estate staff recommends the approval of an ordinance authorizing the lease of 237 square feet of retail concession space located at 4612 West 59th Street at the CTA's Midway Orange Line Station to Uni Inc. Uni Inc. will operate a newsstand and convenience store offering snacks and incidental grab-and-go items. The lease has an initial annual rent of monthly rent of $285 per square foot with a term of 10 years with 2 5-year options. The agreement includes annual rent escalations of 3% and a commitment by Uni Inc. to spend approximately $48,000 to improve the space. The space was offered at a suggested rent range of $180 to $200 per square foot. The tenant will be responsible for paying for the utilities and any applicable taxes. I will be happy to take any questions at this time.
Thank you, Bill. Any questions, Director Chevrolet?
No questions.
Director Jakes?
No questions.
Director Miller?
No question.
Director Irvine?
No questions.
Chairman Silva?
No questions.
Director Rosales?
No questions.
Director Peterson?
Yeah, Bill, just a question in terms of the tenant move-in. You think the shelter-in-place order could impact when the tenant might actually move into the space?
I mean, I think it depends, Chairman, on how long the shelter-in-place order goes and some of those terms. It takes a little while for us to fully execute the lease. They have to get their insurance requirements together. They are planning some renovations to it to update the interior. So there's some activity going on before they would actually be live in the space. Without knowing the full trajectory of kind of the current pandemic, it's hard to fully predict that. But I think there is some background work that's occurring to get them ready to go that will be churning in the upcoming months when we're most likely impacted.
Okay, thanks.
There are no further questions on this item, Chairman Silva.
Since there are no further questions, may I have leave to place this item on the omnibus for board approval?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Director Rosales, seconded by Director Irvine. Chairman Silva, we may now proceed to agenda item number 14.
Our final order of business today is the review of an intergovernmental agreement with the City of Chicago through its Department of Police for federal year 2019 Transit Security Grant Funds. Ron Esther.
Ronald Esther, Chief of Safety and Security. This ordinance is to authorize an intergovernmental agreement with the City of Chicago through the Department of Police for FY 2019 Transit Security Grant Funds. In 2019, the Transit Security Grant Program allocated funds for the nation's key high-threat urban areas to enhance security for critical transit infrastructure. CTA has received grant money under the program every year since it was enacted in 2007. The Transit Security Grant Program awarded funds to CPD's Transit OPAC Anti-Terrorism Operation and the Transit Terrorism Surge Operation. CPD is the primary transit security provider for the Chicago Transit Authority and is therefore eligible for reimbursement of operational costs that apply to counterterrorism. Staff recommends that CTA enter into an intergovernmental agreement with the Chicago Police Department to pass through FY 2019 Department of Homeland Security funds for transit-related anti-terrorism operations. That concludes our report, and we're happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ron. Any questions, Judge Chevrolet?
No questions.
Reverend Jakes?
No questions.
Reverend Miller?
No questions.
Director Irvine?
No questions.
Chairman Silva?
No questions.
Director Rosales?
No questions.
Director Peterson?
No questions.
There are no further questions on this item, Chairman Silva.
Since there are no further questions, may I have leave to place this item on the omnibus for board approval?
So moved.
Second.
That motion was moved by Director Rosales and seconded by Director Irvine. Chairman Silva, there is no further business to come before this committee.
Since there is no further business to come before the committee, may I have a motion to approve the omnibus?
So moved.
Second.
The motion to approve the omnibus has been moved by Director Alvarez and seconded by Director Irvine. I will now take the roll call vote. Director Chevrolet.
Yes.
Director Jakes.
Yes.
Director Miller.
Yes.
Director Irvine.
Yes.
Chairman Silva.
Yes.
Director Alvarez.
Yes.
Director Peterson.
Yes.
The motion to approve the omnibus passes with 7 yes votes, Chairman Silva.
And finally, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
The motion was moved by Director Alvarez and seconded by Director Irvine. I will now take a roll call vote for the motion to adjourn. Director for the committee to adjourn. Director Chevrolet.
Yes.
Director Jakes.
Yes.
Director Miller.
Yes.
Director Irvine.
Yes.
Chairman Silva.
Yes.
Director Alvarez.
Yes.
Director Peterson.
Yes.
The committee is adjourned, and we will begin the board meeting in about 1 minute. Good afternoon. We are now about to begin the Transit Board meeting for April 2020. Chairman Peterson, you may start the meeting.
Thanks, Greg. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being on the call. I'd like to call to order the regular scheduled meeting of Chicago Transit Board for April 8th, 2020. Would the Secretary call the roll?
Yes. Director Chevrolet.
Present.
Director Jakes.
Present.
Director Miller.
Present.
Director Irvine.
Present.
Director Silva.
Present.
Director Alvarez.
Present.
Chairman Peterson.
Present.
Chairman, we have a quorum of the board with all 7 members present.
All right. Thanks, Greg. The first order of business is public comment. Greg?
Yes, sir. We have 1 public comment speaker, and then we have written communication that I will read into the record. But first, we will start with our public comment speaker, Georgiana Jacobs. Ms. Jacobs, are you here?
I am here.
Well, thank you, Ms. Jacobs. I'm glad you were able to join us. It was nice speaking to you yesterday. And would you like to address the board concerning your matter?
I would. Thank you very much. I've been working to try and get our bus stop reinstated from where it was moved. It was originally at Broadway and Montrose. They moved the bus stop to Broadway and Cullum. And because of the distance and the very unique street configuration, it is very difficult to reach, especially for seniors. But I did have signatures collected, about 18 pages, that I turned over to my alderman, and they were turned over to you guys at the RTA to reinstate the bus stop. Since just this morning, or just yesterday, I heard that there was a reevaluation of the bus stop, and that well, I don't have a copy of it. It was read to me over the phone, talking about the footage from here to there and so forth and so on. Bottom line is that it would be possible to reinstate the bus stop at Montrose and Broadway, not where it was originally, but across the street on the north side of the street instead of the south side of the street. So that would be an alternative, but it's really needed. If you don't know the area here on the near north side, Cullen is at a point that the streets Broadway and Sheridan merge, and it's a diagonal street. It's difficult to cross, and I was really concerned, during the winter months, the slipperiness of the street and people with walkers. But it's not just people with walkers and what have you, and walking canes. It's everybody. So I'm imploring the board to understand and to vote to get the bus stop reinstated. Do you have any questions for me?
No questions for you. Just want to thank you for bringing this to the board's attention. I think Mike Connolly is on the phone. And Mike, I don't know if you could share any updates with the board regarding, because I think this issue was brought to our attention back in March. What's going on with that potential bus stop?
So this is Mike Connolly, your Chief Planning Officer. As your speaker mentioned, she was informed yesterday that there is an alternative to the bus stop elimination that she is concerned about. It will require aldermanic approval and removal of a row of paid parking spaces. But my staff will follow up with the alderman and see if it is in fact an alternative and possible to try to do this.
I've already put it. Excuse me. This is Georgie Jacobs back again. I already have a call into the alderman. It's difficult because, no one's in their offices right now. But if I can get his approval, will you move it back?
Ma'am, we'd have to get his approval and CDOT approval as well. So we'll proceed with going through what needs to be done. But I can't promise you that because the alderman gives you approval, it will actually be done. And there are more steps than just going to the alderman.
What other steps do I need to take?
We have to go to CDOT, who controls this sidewalk and this street. We are operating our buses on CDOT's streets. So we will have to go to CDOT to see if they would approve of this alternative.
And
after we go to the alderman and get the aldermanic approval.
Ms. Jacobs,
and who is your contact at CDOT? Hello?
Ms. Jacobs, this is Greg Longini, the board secretary. We can't answer all these questions right now, but you have our word that Mike Connolly and our staff will be in touch with you on this immediately, and we'll communicate with you in terms of what needs to be done. As Mike was saying, it's not just us, it's not just the alderman. There's city agencies and other factors involved. But we thank you for coming before us with this question. We know it's an issue for you and many other people in the neighborhood, and we'll be in touch with you. We cannot solve the problem today, but that does not mean that we're not going to continue to communicate with you and others in the community to try to make this work for everybody. There's a lot of steps involved.
Okay, I will be patient. And Greg, you've been wonderful organizing and getting me to speak in front of the board, and I appreciate it. And I appreciate the board listening to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jacobs. Have a great day and stay healthy.
Thank you.
You too.
Okay.
Be well.
Thank you, Ms. Jacobs.
Okay.
Chairman, we now have written communication, this is Longini again, that was sent to me yesterday at 10 o'clock in the morning by Cameron Pestinger, spelled P as in Peter, E-S-T-I-N-G-E-R. One second. The communication is as follows. Dear Gregory Longini, I am submitting the following public comments for the CTA board meeting tomorrow on behalf of a group of concerned Chicagoans. Number one, the board has suggested that they are offering telehealth services and other healthcare services to CTA workers. We know from both second chance workers and full-time employees who have been contacted by the CTA that they have been exposed and are currently symptomatic, that they have not been contacted by anyone at CTA about telehealth, testing, or any health services whatsoever. Please clarify why you are saying that you are offering these services when you are not. Number two, the city has not been clear about how many workers have tested positive or tested at all for COVID-19. Currently, the mayor is updating on other city employees, such as CPD, and has suggested offering hotel accommodations for quarantine. Meanwhile, CTA workers are going into work with reports of confirmed cases of COVID-19 in their workplace, while this is not being reported by the city, county, or state. Please clarify how many cases there are in this workplace and what accommodations are being made for these city employees that parallel other city employees at this moment. Number three, the mayor announced today, Monday, that routes will not be suspended regardless of low ridership. Can you clarify what protections are being offered to workers at this moment? It has been confirmed that only 2 sanitizing wipes and a pair of gloves are being offered, hardly the demands being suggested across the country for frontline workers and public services. What is the rationale for keeping ghost routes going in the midst of the pandemic? Number 4, the current protocol for buses that have been reported to have had exposure to COVID-19 is to quarantine the vehicles for 72 hours. Given the most recent data on the life of the virus on surfaces, can the CTA respond to its protocol for cleaning these buses and the safety of the workers who must clean them? It is our understanding that extra protection is only provided if blood is found on the buses. But given the spread of this virus, can you please expand on how equipment is provided that parallels the actual transmission of COVID-19? And finally, number 5, can the board tell us how they are specifically protecting the Second Chance Program frontline workers who have no benefits and no health insurance, and again, who are losing their state benefits given the number of hours they are working for the CTA? These employees are particularly vulnerable. They fear losing their jobs for not showing up out of concern for their health and safety. They fear losing their pay even if they are sick because of the precariousness of their situation, and they have no support if they do happen to get sick or exposed to this virus. Many of these employees have underlying conditions. What is the CTA going to do explicitly to protect these employees if they, by working under hazardous conditions and as frontline workers, fall sick with COVID-19 in the coming weeks? Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Greg. Dorval, can you respond?
Yes, Chairman. With regards to item number 1, I think it's important to note that CTA does have enhanced health care services that it provides to both exempt and union employees. Previously, this benefit was only available as part of part of all healthcare packages, but not available as part of all healthcare packages. But CTA expanded it to make sure it'd be available to all employees at no additional cost. Telehealth services are now presented to employees when they log into their healthcare account, and additionally, CTA sent emails about the service to all employees, posted the information at work locations, and included it in the information presented on the information screens at nearly 50 employee facilities. In addition, CTA's healthcare provider, Cigna, is in the process of sending out a mailing to employees specifically informing them about the services. With regards to Second Chance employees, CTA has worked with its medical services provider, Concentra, to make sure that an employee without healthcare coverage could call or come into one of our urgent care facilities if they were experiencing COVID-19 symptoms at no cost to the employee. regards to notifications of positive COVID-19 cases and follows the same process that all city agencies are following. In each case reported, even if it is not confirmed, the sick employee stays home with pay until they recover. Following CDC and CDPH guidelines, we also immediately identify, notify, and remove from service any fellow employees who have had close contact with a sick employee. The CDPH defines close contact as being within 6 feet of someone for 10 minutes or more. Those employees are told to quarantine with pay for 14 days for when they last had close contact with the sick employee. CTA has also posted notices at the work locations advising employees that a coworker has reported to be positive for COVID-19 and they should take the appropriate precautions. In every communication we have with employees about COVID-19, we continue to reiterate the Chicago Department of Public Health guidance and also remind them of the city's coronavirus website, which is constantly being updated and provides directions on who should be tested for COVID-19. I think it's important to point out specifically that no employee under any circumstances will be terminated because they go out sick as a result of the COVID-19 virus. And in fact, we have expanded our sick pay benefits to ensure that all employees, while they are out sick, get paid. With regards to the question regarding the continuation of service and the sanitation of our vehicles, CTA continues to coordinate closely and follow both CDC and CDPH guidance around the proper use of PPEs. CTA is providing gloves and hand sanitizers to all employees and has distributed extensive information to all work locations about the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the best practices recommended by city, state, and national health experts. We also have adjusted the common room areas to allow for social distancing and have posted signs throughout the work locations regarding the importance of distancing. CTA is also providing hand wipes for the operators to wipe down their specific work areas around their cabins that they operate in. We're not limiting them to just 2 hand sanitizers a day. And the idea is to really give them some additional material for wiping down their steering wheel and other things in between the time that CTA will do a regular cleaning of the vehicle itself. In addition, I have ensured that buses that are out on the street during this pandemic are only those equipped with protective shields. That creates a barrier between the bus operators and the riders. On the rail side, all rail operators are entirely enclosed in operating cabs at the front of the train, and all rail station attendants conduct their work from inside enclosed kiosks in our stations. As for our ridership losses during this pandemic, each day CTA still carries about 250,000 riders a day, including transit-dependent riders accessing essential services, as well as essential employees such as healthcare workers, emergency responders, grocery store employees, and others. The number of people CTA is carrying each day is still, although substantially lower than our normal ridership levels, more than Metro would carry on a regular day and more than many other cities such as Minneapolis, Phoenix, Detroit carry on a normal day. Running more service allows for greater social distancing for our riders, which is one of the reasons that I have continued to run as best as possible normal service in spite of the fact that our ridership has declined. With regards to cleaning, in accordance with CDPH guidelines, if equipment used by the employee has not already been cleaned as a result of CTA's daily cleaning schedule, it will be removed and cleaned immediately. In addition, the work location areas the employee accessed are also cleaned. The cleaning does not happen only if blood is found on the buses. The cleaning happens as part of a regular step that we take if it is identified as a bus that the employee who is tested positive for COVID-19 was using at the time. It is important to note that prior to this COVID-19 pandemic, CTA already had one of the most rigorous and extensive cleaning schedules in the transit industry. Our rail cars, buses, stations, and work facilities are cleaned and disinfected throughout each day and receive deeper cleanings nightly on a regular basis. In fact, most of the enhanced cleaning that most transit agencies have implemented during this pandemic have basically raised their cleaning to the level that CTA was already doing as part of its normal daily operation. We have also informed the public about these cleaning practices via our website, which contains the information about the amount of cleaning that we do, as well as the products that we use to clean our system on a daily basis. With regards to Second Chance Program frontline workers, CTA quickly recognized the need for all employees to access additional leave as part of the response to the COVID-19 outbreak. On March 17, CTA issued a leave policy addendum for essentially bargained for employees, which includes the Second Chance apprentices, that granted additional paid time off to union employees, including Second Chance apprentices, so that they would continue to be paid their full rate of pay and maintain their employment if they became ill with COVID-19 or if they are directed to quarantine because of COVID-19. For instance, if a member of their household becomes ill, it is important that all employees have the ability to stay home. If they are sick without worrying about their paycheck or their employment. CTA then worked with our medical service provider, Concentra, to make sure that an employee without health care coverage could call or come in to any one of their urgent care facilities if they were experiencing COVID-19 symptoms at no additional cost to the employee. CTA has reminded employees throughout this time that all employees, including Second Chance participants, have access to CJ's Employee Assistance Program. And finally, the Second Chance Program is a partnership that I would remind the board with partner agencies who support the participants with wraparound services. And the CTA, as part of this apprenticeship program, is intending to provide them with the job experience, training, and support that they need to find permanent long-term employment. We have always recognized that participants encounter additional barriers during their employment, be it child care, housing, or otherwise, and make sure that we have agencies who can assist those employees. Second Chance participants also have an internal advocate within the CTA in the Training and Workforce Development Department and outside of the management chain of command. The Training and Workforce Development Department continually checks with participants, their managers, and partner agencies to make sure we are identifying any barriers and addressing them. And I can't emphasize this enough in terms of my closing remarks here. No employee, be it the Second Chance Program or any of my full-time or part-time employees, will be terminated because they go out sick as a result of the COVID-19 illness. We have been very clear about that throughout all of the brochures and material we put out to our employees, and we continue to reemphasize that whenever we can. The bottom line is, I don't want employees coming to work sick. That endangers themselves, that endangers their fellow employees, that endangers our customers and the riding public. And so we are encouraging employees to go home and stay home until they feel better. And we have done that by basically providing them full pay, which is more than the collective bargaining agreement would require, in order to ensure that they suffer no financial hardship or have any other perverse incentive to want to come into work in spite of the fact that they may not be feeling well.
Dorval, thanks for that. Did you have any other comments?
No, that was it.
Okay. Karen, what I would hope, and the other board members can kind of weigh in, and that is that, because I think Dorval laid out point by point, trying to address the concerns raised in the letter. If we could also respond, if you could respond on Dorval's behalf in terms of a written response to the concerns raised in this letter that would incorporate Dorval's response to the board.
Karen Simons, General Counsel. Yes, Chairman, I can do that.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
One other point that I want to make as we move forward with this, and I've made this point to each of you individually in conversations that I've had. Everyone needs to understand that there is no written playbook for what we're dealing with right now. We're all trying to figure it out as we go along. And so I didn't go into this, event with a defined answer to every question or every incident or every situation that we're going to encounter. I do need to say that we have been in constant communication with our unions who represent all the bargain for employees at CTA to both seek their input, guidance, and sign off on the things that we are doing. And we continue to do that going forward. I have no doubt that there will be additional policies and initiatives that we will pursue.
Thank you. First, President Carter, thank you so much for all the detailed explanation and for you and your team and all the work that you've been doing and scrambling to try and manage the response, because this has been an unprecedented threat that CTA and the community is dealing with. I just saw in today's New York Times that in New York City, 41 transit workers have died from COVID-19, which even though New York City has a much larger system than ours, even proportionally, if that were happening in Chicago, that would still be just a stunning number of people. And I know the situation in New York is different than Chicago and is the worst spot in the U.S. and maybe right now, maybe even the world. Have you been able to, or your team been able to look at what's happening in New York to determine if there's anything else that we could do or any lessons that we could learn to try and prevent similar situation from happening here?
I think the short answer to your question is yes. We have been looking at what New York is doing. We've been looking at just about what every transit system has been doing across the country. And we are certainly stealing from and using things that other transit systems have done or learned in our experience for what we do. I am now on almost daily calls with CEOs around the country talking about various issues that we're experiencing with regards to the pandemic and exchanging ideas and thoughts about how to deal with them. You're absolutely right to point out the situation in New York is horrific. And certainly the number of deaths by transit employees in New York is a very sobering fact. I will say that we have been fortunate so far to not have experienced an employee death at CTA, but we obviously have employees who are getting sick as a result of this virus. I think it's also important to point out that with the ongoing community spread that's happening throughout the entire city, the likelihood of more employees getting sick and more challenges facing CTA are very real. And while we may not experience what New York has experienced here in Chicago, I think it's safe to say, and if anyone has been following all of the media accounts from both the mayor and the governor around this, that we're preparing for a wave of challenges in Chicago as well, possibly within the next week or so. And so as a result, I'm continuing to identify new policies and procedures we can put in place that I hope will provide additional layers of protection for our employees, as well as continuing to encourage our employees that if they are sick to stay home and to not try to work if you are experiencing any sort of flu-like symptom, whether you know or don't know that you have COVID-19. And we'll continue to pursue that as we go forward to make sure that we're identifying best practices everywhere and aligning them with the advice that we're getting from the health experts for the actions that we should take here at CTA.
Say, Dorval, this is Terry. Just a follow-up question, too. In light of the guidance around masks, the wearing of masks, have we made any adjustments as it relates to additional, I know you mentioned the gloves and
yes,
things in terms of the cleaning, but what are we doing around the issues of masks for our workers?
We have actually issued guidance to all of our employees, informing them that they are allowed to wear cloth masks in the performance of their work, as long as it does not create a safety hazard. My understanding is that many of our frontline employees are now wearing masks as a further layer of protection. As you pointed out, Chairman, up until Friday, the guidance that we have been getting from both CDC and the Chicago Department of Public Health is that masks were not necessary if you were healthy. That guidance obviously changed dramatically on Friday, and so we have updated our policy to reflect the most recent guidance from CDC and have instructed our employees accordingly as to the ability to start to use cloth masks immediately if they choose to do so. It is a voluntary action on our part. We're not mandating them, but as far as I've been able to see anecdotally, most employees, if not all, are taking advantage of this new directive to wear masks in performance of their work.
Are we doing anything to acquire masks to provide them?
We are in the process of procuring masks to provide for them. As you can imagine, when the CDC announced that they were going to allow or recommend this, the demand for these masks went through the roof almost immediately. So we are in the process of doing that. In the meantime, we have given our employees a link that shows them how to make their own mask, or have authorized them to wear any personal mask that they choose to wear or covering to basically address their personal situation.
I know, I'm sure there's coordination with the Chicago Department of Public Health and the city, who I think are purchasing, PPE items in bulk. So again, I don't know if you're talking with them about how they're purchasing it and using them, but that might be also.
Yes, we have daily meetings with the city and all the city departments about resource needs and bulk purchasing. I can tell you the city is experiencing the same challenge that we are experiencing right now in terms of getting access to the mask, and are in the process of attempting to procure masks themselves. But yes, we work very closely with the city on all issues, not just this issue, and have at least 2 calls a day with the city, talking through the strategies and the issues and the resources needed for the city's overall response to the pandemic.
Okay. Any other questions for Dorval from the board?
I guess I just have a question. This is Arabelle. There's a number of organizations that are making, the cloth masks as well. If some of them are making that as a charitable contribution, who would they contact at the CTA for that?
Actually, the city of Chicago has been the one that's been the conduit for any sort of charitable donations for response to the pandemic. And Arabelle, I can get you the actual contact information of the person in the city that we would direct them to.
Okay, great.
I can give it to the rest of the board as well. I just don't have it off the top of my head.
Sounds good. Thank you.
This is Greg. Any question from Judge Chevrolet?
No questions.
Or a comment? Reverend Jakes?
No.
Reverend Miller?
No question. Thanks.
Director Silver, do you have any questions or comments?
No questions.
Okay, then, Chairman, I believe all the questions are finished and Dorval's presentation seems finished. So given that, this concludes the public comment section of today's board meeting, sir.
All right, thanks, Greg. The next order of business today is the approval of the March 12th, 2020, March 11th, 2020 board minutes. The minutes were previously distributed. I will now entertain a motion. If there are no questions, I'll now entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the regular board meeting of March 11th, 2020.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Director Alvarez-Rosales, seconded by Director Irvine. We'll now take a roll call vote on the March minutes. Director Chevrolet.
Yes.
Director Jakes.
Yes.
Director Miller.
Yes.
Director Irvine.
Abstain.
Director Silva.
Yes.
Director Alvarez-Rosales.
Yes.
Chairman Peterson.
Yes.
That motion is approved with 6 yes votes and 1 abstention by Director Irvine.
All right, thanks, Greg. The next order of business is board matters. Karen?
Karen Simons, General Counsel. Thank you, Chairman. This next matter is a recommendation from the Law Department to settle the lawsuit entitled Joanne Baroud, Limited Guardian for the Estate and Person of Raymond Baroud versus CTA and Eric Towner, Circuit Court of Cook County number 012694. This case involves a pedestrian bus accident which occurred on November 16, 2018 at approximately 3:30 in the afternoon at Madison and Pulaski. Mr. Baroud, who at the time of the accident was 80 years old, was walking about 8 to 10 feet outside the crosswalk when the CTA bus made a right turn and struck him. As a result of the accident, Mr. Baroud's left leg was amputated about 5 inches above the knee. His medical expenses are $370,000 and ongoing. He is currently residing in a skilled nursing home. The case was mediated before former Judge Hogan. On March 12th, the parties have agreed to a resolution of $3 million to resolve the case in its entirety, and the Law Department recommends this settlement. That concludes my report on the case.
Okay, thanks, Karen. We will now consider board item number 4A, a settlement recommendation amount of $3 million in the Circuit Court of Cook County, case number 2018L012694, the case of Joanne Baroud, limited guardian of the estate and preliminary guardian of the persons of Raymond Baroud, a person under limited guardianship versus the Chicago Transit Authority, a municipal corporation, and Eric D. Towner. May I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Director Alvarez, seconded by Director Irvine. I will now take a roll call vote on the settlement offer. Director Chevrolet.
Yes.
Director Jakes.
Approve.
Director Miller.
Yes.
Director Irvine.
Yes.
Director Silva.
Yes.
Director Alvarez.
Yes.
Chairman Peterson.
Yes.
That motion is approved, sir, with 7 yes votes.
Thanks, Greg. The next order of business is a report from the Committee on Finance, Audit, and Budget. Director Silva.
Hey, good morning. The Committee on Finance, Audit, and Budget met earlier this morning. The committee approved the March 2020 committee minutes and reviewed the finance report. The committee also reviewed 11 ordinances. An ordinance authorizing the establishment of a short-term operating borrowing program, an ordinance authorizing the execution of supplemental indentures and the issuance of capital receipts revenue refunding bonds, the Series 2020 Garvey bonds. An ordinance authorizing the execution of supplemental indentures and issuance of sales tax receipts revenue refunding bonds, Series 2020, and sales tax receipts and transfer tax receipt revenue refunding bonds, the Series 2020 refunding bonds. An ordinance authorizing the execution of supplemental indentures and issuance of sales tax receipts revenue bonds, Series 2020, the Series 2020 new money bonds. An ordinance authorizing the execution of supplemental indentures and issuance of sales tax receipts revenues bonds, Series 2020 ground transportation tax IGA revenues. An ordinance authorizing an amendment to a diesel fuel contract with Mansfield Oil Company of Gainesville, Inc. to extend the contract for 1 year. An ordinance authorizing the treasurer to execute a diesel fuel contract. An ordinance authorizing a co-promotional advertising trade agreement with Bank of America NA for the 2020 Bank of America Chicago 13.1. An ordinance authorizing an amendment to a sublease to Decennial Group LLC, a portion of property located at 120 North Racine Avenue, Chicago, Illinois. An ordinance authorizing a lease of retail concession space located at 4612 West 59th Street, Chicago, Illinois, Orange Line. An ordinance authorizing an intergovernmental agreement with the City of Chicago through its Department of Police for federal fiscal year 2019 transit security grant funds. The committee approved all 11 ordinances, placed all of them on the omnibus, and recommended for approval of the omnibus. That concludes my report, Chairman Peterson.
Thank you, Director Silva. May I now have a motion to approve the omnibus as stated by Director Silva?
So moved.
Second.
The motion has been moved by Director Alvarez and seconded by Director Irvine. I will now take a roll call vote. Judge Chevrolet.
Yes.
Reverend Jakes.
Yes.
Reverend Miller.
Yes.
Director Irvine.
Yes.
Director Silva.
Yes.
Director Alvarez.
Yes.
Chairman Peterson.
Yes.
The motion to approve the omnibus passes with 7 yes votes, sir.
Thanks, Greg. The next agenda item is new business. Greg, is there any new business to come before the board?
Not that I'm aware of, sir.
Thank you, Greg. With no further business to come before the board, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
The motion to adjourn has been moved by Director Alvarez and seconded by Director Irvine. I will take a roll call vote. Director Chevrolet.
Yes.
Director Jakes.
Yes.
Director Miller.
Yes.
Director Irvine.
Yes.
Director Silva.
Yes.
Director Alvarez.
Yes.
Chairman Peterson.
Yes.
The motion passes with 7 yes votes, sir. The board meeting for April is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg, and also to my fellow directors. Thank all of you for being on the call. Big shout out to Herb, who helped set all of this up, and April, and all of the staff involved in it. Again, thank everyone for being on the call. Continue to stay safe, and hopefully we'll get a chance to see each other next month.
All right. Thanks.